When you look at the wall of a pre-engineered building, you will notice several horizontal steel members running between the columns. But what exactly are these members? Why are they provided? And where exactly are they located in a real PEB structure? These horizontal secondary members are called Girts. In simple terms, a Girt is a horizontal structural member provided in the wall framing system of a PEB. Its main purpose is to support the wall cladding and help transfer the forces acting on the wall back into the main structural framing. But simply knowing the definition is not enough. If you are learning PEB detailing or reading a PEB drawing, you should be able to look at a real structure and immediately identify the Girts. So in this video, we will do exactly that. We will first understand what a wall Girt is, then identify its exact location in the building, verify it from real project elevations, look at Girt connections with columns, and finally understand the important functions performed by these members. So let's start by identifying the Girt in the actual PEB structure. Now that we know what a Girt is, the next question is more important. Where do we actually find it? A wall Girt is normally located horizontally between the vertical structural members of the wall framing system. If you look at a typical PEB wall, the main columns are the vertical primary members. Between these columns, horizontal members are arranged at different levels. These horizontal members are the wall Girts. The wall cladding is then supported and fixed through this wall framing arrangement. So, when you look at a PEB wall from the outside, you may mainly see the cladding. But behind that cladding is the structural framing system, and the Girts form an important part of that system. One important point to remember is that Girts are secondary structural members. They are different from the main columns and rafters, which form the primary structural frame. The exact number, spacing, size, and arrangement of Girts depend on the project design and the requirements shown in the approved drawings. Therefore, when detailing or checking a PEB structure, never assume the Girt arrangement from a standard building. Always verify it from the actual project drawings. And this is where real project drawings become extremely useful. Let's stop looking at the concept and identify the Girts directly from the project. Here we are looking at the side wall framing of the real PEB project. Now look carefully at the horizontal members running between the vertical columns. These are the wall Girts. Notice that the columns provide the vertical support, while the Girts are arranged horizontally between them. The wall framing therefore creates a series of horizontal support lines for the wall system. This is an important drawing reading skill. When you see a side wall framing elevation, don't try to understand every line at the same time. First, identify the primary members. Find the columns. Then identify the horizontal secondary members. The horizontal members at the wall levels are the Girts. Once you understand this pattern, reading a PEB wall framing elevation becomes much easier. You can also see that the Girt arrangement continues across different bays of the building. This means the wall framing is not just one isolated connection. It forms a continuous secondary framing system along the building. But can we identify the same Girts from another type of drawing? Yes. Let's verify them in the frame elevation. This is the frame elevation of the same type of PEB structure. A frame elevation is especially useful because it helps us understand the relationship between the main structural frame and the secondary members. First, identify the main vertical columns. Then look at the sloping roof members, which form the primary frame. Now look at the horizontal members within the wall zone. These are the girts. The important thing here is the relationship between the members. The main frame carries the primary structural loads, while the secondary wall framing supports the wall system and transfers the relevant forces into the main frame. This is why understanding member hierarchy is so important when reading PEB drawings. A beginner may look at all these lines as simply steel members. An experienced detailer or engineer starts asking, which member is primary? Which member is secondary? Where is it supported? What does it support? And how is it connected? That approach makes drawing interpretation much more accurate. Now let's move to the end wall, because the girt arrangement there can look different from the side wall. Here we are looking at the end wall framing elevation. Again, start with the vertical framing members. Then look for the horizontal members running across the wall. These are the end wall girts. The important thing to understand is that the term girt refers to the function and location within the wall framing system. The arrangement can vary depending on the wall configuration, openings, bracing, and project requirements. For example, an end wall may contain openings such as a rolling shutter or other architectural requirements. In those locations, the regular framing arrangement may need to coordinate around the opening. That is why we should never simply copy a girt arrangement from another project. The actual drawing must always be checked. In our real project drawing, we can see how the horizontal wall framing members work together with the vertical framing and other components. This is the practical difference between learning a definition and learning how to read an actual PEB structure. But there is another part of the girt that every detailer should understand: the connection. Let's zoom in. Now we are looking closely at a typical girt-to-column connection. This is where the girt meets the main vertical column. The connection is not simply about placing one steel member against another. The girt has to be properly supported and connected to the column so that the required forces can be transferred through the connection. Look carefully at the connection plates and bolts shown in this model. The girt is connected to the supporting column using the connection arrangement provided in the project detailing. This close-up view is extremely useful because a general elevation tells us where the girt is located, but the connection detail tells us how the girt is actually attached. When checking a connection, we should pay attention to the member orientation, supporting plate or cleat arrangement, bolt locations, and the relationship between the girt and the column. However, one important rule applies here. The exact connection arrangement must always be taken from the approved project connection detail. We should never assume bolt size, bolt quantity, plate thickness, or connection geometry simply because a similar connection was used on another project. The real drawing is the source of truth. Now, the connection we just saw was at the main column. But what happens when the girt meets another column position inside the building? Let's look at the center column connection. Here we can see another girt connection, this time at a center column location. Notice how the girt framing approaches the vertical column and how the connection arrangement accommodates the members on either side. This is an important point when reading a structural model. A building may contain different column locations, but the basic framing principle remains. The vertical column provides the support, and the horizontal girt connects into that supporting framing. The connection must provide the required structural continuity and allow the wall framing forces to be transferred into the main structure. Look closely at the bolts and connection plates shown in this model. This is why 3D modeling can be extremely useful for understanding PEB detailing. In a two-dimensional elevation, several members can overlap visually. In a three-dimensional model, we can rotate around the connection and understand which member is in front, which member is behind, and where the connection components are actually located. For a structural detailer, that understanding is valuable not only for modeling, but also for preparing accurate fabrication and erection information. So far, we have looked at the girt as an individual member and at its connections. Now let's step back and see the bigger picture. Complete picture. Look at the walls of the building. You can see the horizontal girt members extending through the wall framing system. Now compare that with what we saw in the individual connection details. The same member that looked like a simple horizontal line in the elevation is now visible as a complete three-dimensional framing system. This is one of the most important lessons when learning PEB drawings. Never study an individual drawing in isolation. Connect the information between drawings. The elevation tells you where the member is located. The framing view helps you understand its arrangement. The connection detail shows how it is attached. And the 3D model helps you understand how everything comes together spatially. When these views are combined, the PEB structure becomes much easier to understand. In this building, the girts work together with the columns, wall cladding, bracing and other secondary members to form the wall framing system. And this is why proper girt detailing is important for fabrication, erection, and coordination of the building. But we still have one important question left. What exactly does the girt do? Let's summarize its key functions. Let's quickly summarize the most important functions of a wall girt. First, girts provide support for the wall cladding system. They create the structural support locations where the wall panels can be fixed according to the project detailing. Second, girts help transfer the forces acting on the wall system into the supporting structural framing. Third, they form an important part of the secondary wall framing system between the primary columns. Fourth, their arrangement helps coordinate the wall cladding, openings, and other wall components with the main structural frame. And finally, properly detailed girt connections are essential for maintaining the required structural arrangement and stability of the wall framing system. So remember this simple concept. Column, vertical primary member. Girt, horizontal wall secondary member. Cladding, supported by the wall framing system. And the connection between these members allows the forces to be transferred through the structural system. If you are reading a PEB drawing, start by identifying the primary frame. Then identify the secondary members. Then study their connections. Once you follow this sequence, Even a complex PEB drawing becomes much easier to understand. In this video, we identified what a girt is, where wall girts are located, how they appear in side and end wall elevations, and how they connect to the main structural columns. And this understanding will also help you when you move from 2D drawings to 3D PEB modeling. If this explanation helped you understand PEB structures more clearly, please like the video, comment with your questions, share it with other civil engineering students, detailers, and site engineers, and subscribe to ACP Civil Hub for more practical PEB engineering tutorials. And don't forget to press the bell icon so you don't miss the next lesson. Keep learning, keep applying, keep growing with ACP Civil Hub.